You're watching David Berkowitz on Testimony, Profiles in Faith.
I was arrested in 1977 and was sentenced to multiple life terms in 1978. And I came to the upstate prison system, and it was like a dungeon of despair.
Of course, at Attica we deal with hardened criminals, and yet there was something about this case. All the havoc and destruction that had taken place, the murders, and the whole city being paralyzed by one individual. And now he was going to be coming to Attica, where I was a guard.
Prison life is tough. And so I had my struggles. I had my own guilt, my anger, my frustration with life. And I was in a self-destructive mode.
David would be a person, when you looked at his eyes, you'd been around him, it didn't take long, and those dark spirits, those things that we are probably scared of the most, the occult kind of things, the things you can't rationally describe, actually would come out of him. And they come out of him in his talk, in his eyes. He got to the point where we called him David Berkowitz.
One day in 1987, I was walking the prison yard here at Sullivan. I remember feeling very down and very depressed, and even thinking with the idea of possibly ending my life. Because at the time I had been in prison for 10 years, and I'm doing, life with no hope of release. As I was walking, this other young man began to walk in the opposite direction, and he came up to me and he introduced himself, and he says, "Hey, I know who you are. You're David Berkowitz, right?" And I was like on guard and suspicious. Yeah, what of it, And he looked at me and says, "Well, listen, Dave, I want to just tell you something, that Jesus Christ loves you. He wants to forgive you, and he's got a plan and a purpose for your life." And I said to him in a cold way, I says, "Listen, I really don't want to hear that, because there's no way God could love someone like me. God's not interested in someone like me. I've done too much evil, God, there's no hope." He says, "No, you're wrong." He says, "David, God loves you, and he sent me here just to tell you that." I said, "Oh yeah, really? Cool." And he said, "Listen, I'd like to become your friend. I see you walk the yard, I see you work out. I'd like to just hang out with you if it's okay." We would walk the yard from time to time, and he would just share. He wasn't overbearing. He'd just share a little of his testimony. And then after a few weeks, he gave me a small Gideon's New Testament that had the Psalms and the Proverbs in it. Well, after a period of a couple more weeks, it's like God really began to do something in my heart. But then one night, it was around midnight, I started to read the Psalms, and I came across Psalm 34. And as I was reading down the Psalm, I came to the 6th verse, which said, "This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles." And when I got to that verse, suddenly tears began to well up in my eye. And I says, wow, this poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and delivered him out of all his troubles. And I just suddenly felt this desire to talk to the Lord. And I shut off my light because I was crying. And I felt this urge to get down on my knees in the darkness of the cell. And I began to pour out my heart to the Lord. And I said, "God, I'm so sorry for the life I lived. I know you must be angry with me. I know I disappointed you. I know I disappointed my parents and so many other things." I says, "God, I'm sorry. I just asked Jesus to forgive me, and I just shared with him all my burdens and all my cares. And I don't know how long I was on my knees, about 20 minutes, a half hour. But I remember just crying like a baby. And then I got up off my knees, and it was like I felt something had lifted, something had changed. I didn't know what. And that night I slept like a baby.
Is this real? Is David Berkowitz's conversion real? In fact, when I was told that David Berkowitz first got saved, I said, "But time test it." And I took his testimony, put it in my desk. Years went by, and all I heard was good reports. Kind of funny good reports, because the guards who would come back from the other prison would say, "Oh, David got religion." And I always thought in my mind, I said, I'd like to look him right in the eyes. I would know.
At the beginning, I always tried to justify my faith and try to, felt I had to absolutely convince people that I'm sincere. Jesus just assured me, "Dave, by your fruits they'll know you. You just continue on with me, and I'll make everything right."
When I sat down with him, his heart was changed. There was no evil in it. There was joy in his eyes. There was joy in his heart, and it overflowed. Only Jesus could change David Berkowitz that much. No, there's no other explanation.
When I became a Christian, I got to see a video that was done, a live interview with David. I just instantly saw in his face the same face that I had of having my life changed, and I wanted to go up and meet David. So I just had to see this up close. And when he came out, he just come through the door. You could just tell by his body language this was a brand new person. This was not the David Berkowitz that you saw on television. As soon as I hugged him and I let go, and it was just like, wow, I just hugged this man, and his whole past went by me. This was real. My spirit totally bore witness to David of a changed life.
The Lord has shown me that today I can touch lives in a good and wholesome and positive way, and I'm thankful for that. I can't undo what happened. The Lord has shown me, David, you don't have to live in the guilt. You don't have to live in self-pity and sorrow. He says, just look at today. He says, forget those things that are behind and just keep pressing forward. Just keep looking at me. And he says, I'll take you through this. And I'll use your life for good. What Satan meant for evil, he says, I'm going to use for good.
Pastor Simbla saw the interview between Larry King and David Berkowitz. It so moved him and inspired him by the grace that was on David. He said there was a godly wisdom on him. And Pastor Simbla decided to do a story on his life. And we have a drama team here who immediately began to do some research. We
wanted the truth of God's amazing grace to really be told, and then what greater place to tell it than the place where it happened.
They went and visited him, and they were just overwhelmed after meeting him.
When he walked through those doors, there was just such a sense of, the word I would use to describe it is peaceful, just a very peaceful countenance. And he is a very gentle and soft-spoken man. I came back and began to meet and pray and ask God, how can we possibly tell this story? There's so many different aspects of it, but what is it that you want us to tell?
As the drama went forward, the people in the congregation, I think everyone there just realized, boy, if God could reach David Berkowitz and help him and give him that kind of peace and joy in the prison, then surely he could help me in my life. I was just amazed. I said, I can't believe that I'm going up to encourage people to accept Jesus because of what God did in David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. Because of the son of Sam. There were tears streaming down every face, and they came ready to meet God. They prayed with such intensity that day.
I feel that I'm the most undeserving person in the world. I can never pay society back for the things that I've done because I've taken lives, and there's no way to put someone back into life again once their life was lost. But God has shown me that through what I may have to share, that He will take that, He will anoint that word and touch other people's hearts, that perhaps their life could be saved.
Coming up, listen as David describes how God has given him a new name.
That horrible name, Son of Sam, which I don't use anymore. Guys in here don't even use that name. God has given me a new name, Son of Hope.
And later, hear what David thinks God's message is through his life today.
There's nobody beyond the reach of His salvation, of His outstretched hands of love.
When Testimony, Profiles in Faith continues.